We've now come to the last video in this section, where we'll be discussing important column settings for your data model, as well as how to create hierarchies in your tables. Overall, you'll learn a couple really good, important concepts that you'll be able to take with you before we move on to our next section after we've cleaned up our data model. Alright, let's get started. So we have in front of us our Power BI report. As a reminder, if we want to get to the Data tab, we can come over here to the upper left and click on the button for Data. And this will take us to the Data tab that we were using in our last video. Now the first column setting that I want to discuss is the idea of data type versus formatting for any specific column. Now one of the first column settings I want to discuss is the idea of data type versus formatting, because there's a very important difference between these two in the data model in Power BI. So I'm going to navigate up to my sales table here on the right. I'm going to open the sales table up, and I'm going to go to the date column over here on the right. Now what this has at the moment, if you look at it, it is formatted where it's saying Sunday, April 1st, 2007, April 9th, 2007, all of this data that is in here. Now if we align our eyes over to the left side of the screen, and we look up here under the formatting tab in the middle, we'll see that there are two settings that you have. Date type equals date at the top, and format below it. Now the distinction between these two is very important. The data type is very important because that determines the types of actions you can do against the column. If it is a date data type, you can do time intelligence functions and other advanced things like that. You can sort by oldest to newest, all sorts of things. If it was set as text, that wouldn't work that way. Additionally, number columns can be calculated, so you can do averages, sums, and all of that. Text values can equally as well be used in text-based functions, but data type is very important for the types of ways you are going to use that column. So be careful when you are setting that. Now alternatively, formatting is a little bit easier to move around with, and that's just how you want your information displayed in a visualization in Power BI. Now I find that the date that's currently formatted here is a little bit long, so I would rather change that and have it set from date time here. And something shorter like this, like 3/14/2001, I think is a little bit cleaner, so I'm going to change it to that. Perfect. And I would recommend doing this, going through each table, figuring out how these columns are going to be used, and if there's any kind of formatting that can be applied that will save you time down the road, I would recommend doing that. Especially thinking to the idea that if I use this column 30 times, do I want to have to go into those visualizations and change the formatting every single time over and over again? Or do I want to change it once in my data model as the default and save myself a lot of development time? So the goal is always to save yourself time whenever possible. Now the next concept that I want to talk about is the idea of hiding columns from your data model. Let's come over here to the right and again use our sales table. Now I want to think about what we were doing in the last video with our relationships. Certain columns that we had were used for those relationships. Now think about it for a moment. Would you ever actually use those in a visualization? Specifically, any of the keys that you see in front of you, would you ever use channel key in a visual, or date key, or promotion key? No. What you would instead show is the information from the product's master table, from the geography table. So those all contain the text information you would want to show on a visual. The keys are only there to make sure that the relationships work, but can be hidden from the report view. Let me show you as an example what I'm talking about. So if I was to, in this sales table here, I'm going to hide the promotion key. I'm going to right click and hide, and that's going to disappear from there. I'm going to come over to my report view here, and if I open my sales table now, you'll see that promotion key is not showing on this list. Now if I actually turned on the toggle to view hidden in this layer, you can see that it's still there, but what this does is it makes sure that we can only see the information we want to use in our report view, and it kind of hides all that development stuff behind the curtain so we don't have to have a lot of extra noise in this report perspective. So I'm going to navigate back to the data tab here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to search for the word key up in my search list, and that's going to give me a nice shortened list of columns to hide, all of my key columns for relationships. So I'm going to quickly just run through and hide all of these. Beautiful. I've gone ahead and hidden all my keys. We can quickly confirm over on the report view that we'll be seeing in our next section. If I actually search for the word key, nothing shows up, even though they are still in my data model. So it keeps it nice and clean and organized, and keeps those things shoved behind the curtain for us and for any users of the report. Now, one other thing you can do easily as well with columns in here is any of these columns can be renamed very quickly and easily. As an example, let's go ahead and use promotion key. If I was to double click on that, it gives me an option to rename it. Even better, it actually will add a step in Power Query that will then have an applied step at the end for renaming that column. Well, we can even take this one step further. In addition to renaming columns, you can also delete them if you need to. Like if you realize later on that this column wasn't needed, you can go back and edit the query settings and change the applied step. Alternatively, you can just right-click the column, promotion key, because there is no promotion table in my data model. So I can right-click this and select delete, prompting me if I want to delete the key. I'm good with that. Perfect. And it's easy as that. Now the last thing that I want to cover in this video is the idea of hierarchies. Specifically, levels of hierarchies that are related to an item, a group, a subject, something like that. A really great example to showcase this, if we actually come to our products table and expand the fields list over here, we actually have levels related to the product hierarchy. We have product category name, product subcategory name, and product name. Now, once we get to the report layer, if I wanted to show all of those in a visualization, I would have to add each column one at a time. Now, to avoid that, you can group them together, so you can drag one hierarchy onto an object, a visual, a table, what have you, and it will automatically bring all of the columns associated with that hierarchy in there with you. And it's really easy to add. If we actually want to create a group for all three of these columns, we can start with a category name. I'm just going to take and drag and drop this like a file, my subcategory name. I'm going to drag that on top of product category name. And then I'm also going to drop product name right on the top here as well. So we'll see that it adds to this little collapsible hierarchy, product category name, subcategory name, and product name at the bottom. Give it a better name at the top. We can call this just product hierarchy. There we are. And now with the design this way, anytime we create a new visualization, once we get to that point in Power BI, this will automatically group that information for us as well. Now the last place we can do this too, we can come to our geography table, and very similarly, we can add these all to a hierarchy. We can do continent, region, state, and then city. There we are. Now this can also be added to any visualization in Power BI. I'm going to change this to a better name, and I'm going to call this Geography Hierarchy. Beautiful. And that about covers it for the basic column settings and then the idea and concept of hierarchies in Power BI. We are going to explore a few more as we start digging deeper into the Power BI report environment, but for now that covers it for this section. In our next section, we're going to start using DAX and exploring ways to do data analysis with our data as we actually build out our report in the report view.